Hello, my name is Adland. I am a student of English, and I want to tell you about my journey. Learning English was not easy for me at first, but I did not give up. I found simple ways to practice every day, and now I can speak more naturally. First, I was afraid to speak. What if I made mistakes? What if people laughed at me? But then I learned a secret. Mistakes are part of learning. Once I accepted that, everything changed. When I first started learning English, I was excited but also nervous. I had learned some words in school, and I could understand basic sentences, but speaking was a different challenge. Every time I tried to say something in English, I hesitated. My mind would go blank, and I felt embarrassed. I worried that I would say something wrong or that people would not understand me. So, instead of speaking, I stayed quiet. I listened to others. I read books, and I watched English videos, but I was too scared to use the language myself. One day, I read an article about learning a new language. It said that speaking is like exercising a muscle. If you don't use it, it stays weak. But if you practice every day, it gets stronger. That made me think. Maybe the problem was not that I didn't know English. Maybe the problem was that I wasn't using it enough. That's when I decided to try something new. If I was too shy to speak to other people, why not speak to myself? It sounded strange at first, but I was willing to try anything. The next morning, as soon as I woke up, I whispered in English, "Good morning, Adland." It felt a little silly, but I smiled. Then I continued. I am getting out of bed. I am walking to the window. The sky is blue today. I said everything I was doing, like a narrator in a movie. I am brushing my hair. I am making my breakfast. At first, I spoke very slowly because I had to think about each word. But the more I practiced, the easier it became. After a few days, I realized that this small exercise was helping me in a big way. I was getting used to forming sentences without worrying too much. I wasn't translating from my native language anymore. I was thinking in English, even if it was just simple phrases. I started adding more details. Instead of saying, "I am drinking tea," I said, "I am drinking warm tea with a little honey. It tastes sweet." I wasn't just saying words. I was describing my world in English. A few weeks later, I decided to take it a step further. Instead of just describing what I was doing, I started having imaginary conversations. I would pretend I was talking to a friend. "Hi, how are you?" I would ask myself. Then I would answer, "I am doing well, thank you. How about you?" I did this while walking to school, while cooking, and even while waiting in line at the store. If someone saw me, they might have thought I was crazy, but I didn't care. I was practicing, and I was getting better. There were times when I got stuck. Sometimes I wanted to say something but didn't know the right words. When that happened, I wrote it down and looked it up later. For example, one day, I wanted to describe the sound of rain, but I didn't know how. So I searched online and found the word drizzle. The next time it rained, I said, "The rain is drizzling outside." It sounds soft and peaceful. Learning new words this way made them stick in my mind. As I practiced more, something interesting happened. Speaking English started to feel natural. I didn't have to think so much before saying something. The words came faster. My confidence grew. But I knew that talking to myself was only the first step. If I wanted to sound more natural, I needed to listen to how real English speakers talked. That's when I decided to try something new, watching and copying native speakers. Talking to myself in English had helped me gain confidence, but deep down, I knew that I was still missing something. My words came out more smoothly, and I didn't hesitate as much, but whenever I played back my recordings, something didn't sound quite right. My sentences felt too stiff, too unnatural, like they were taken straight from a textbook. That's when I realized the truth. I was practicing English, but I wasn't practicing real English. I needed to learn how native speakers actually spoke. At first, I didn't know how to do that. I didn't live in an English-speaking country, and I didn't have native English speakers around me. But then I thought about something. Every day, people all over the world learn new things without stepping outside their homes. They watch, they listen, and they copy. And I had something that could connect me to native speakers anytime I wanted: my phone. So, I made a decision. I was going to use movies, TV shows, and online videos to learn not just English words, but English sounds, English expressions, and even English rhythm. The first time I tried this, I picked a scene from a movie I liked. It was a simple conversation between two friends. One of them said, "Are you serious?" in a surprised voice. The other laughed and said, "Yeah, I couldn't believe it either." I paused the video and repeated the line. "Are you serious?" I said out loud. But when I compared my voice to the actors, it sounded different. My words were too flat. The actor sounded surprised and animated, but I sounded like I was just reading from a book. I tried again. "Are you serious?" I added more emotion this time, stretching the word serious just like the actor did. It felt weird at first, like I was exaggerating too much. But when I listened again, I noticed something. I sounded much more natural. That's when I realized that speaking English is not just about using the right words. It's also about how you say them. I started watching English videos every day, but this time I wasn't just listening. I was copying, word for word, sound for sound. I paid attention to the way people spoke in casual conversations. I noticed that they didn't always speak in full sentences. Instead of saying, "I do not know," they said, "I don't know." Instead of, "Let us go," they said, "Let's go." At first, it was strange to say things this way. In school, I had always learned English, in full, proper sentences. But now, I was seeing that native speakers didn't always talk like that. They spoke fast, they connected words, and sometimes they didn't even finish their sentences. I started practicing these small details. I would pause a video and repeat what I heard. Sometimes I would rewind the same sentence 10 times until I got the rhythm right. When someone in a movie said, "What's up?" I didn't just repeat the words. I copied the tone, the speed, and even the casual way they moved their mouth. One of the most surprising things I learned was that English speakers don't always pronounce every letter clearly. In my language, we say every letter in a word, but in English, words blend together. For example, I always thought, "Did you eat?" should be pronounced "Did you eat?" But in movies, people said it like "Did ya eat?" The words connected, and the sounds changed. So I started practicing these natural pronunciations too. Every time I heard a native speaker shorten words or blend sounds, I repeated after them. Slowly, my English started to change. My sentences sounded more relaxed, and I wasn't overthinking every word. To help me remember new phrases and expressions, I kept a small notebook. Every time I watched a video, I wrote down interesting words and sentences. But I didn't just write the words, I also wrote down how people said them. For example, one day I was watching an interview with a famous actor. He was telling a funny story, and at the end, he said, "It was hilarious!" But he didn't just say the words plainly. He stretched the word hilarious, making it sound more dramatic. "It was hilarious." I wrote it down exactly like that in my notebook. Hilarious, hilarious. Every night, I looked at my notebook and practiced saying the words the same way I had heard them. At first, it felt strange, but soon it became fun, like I was acting in a movie. One evening, I was walking home from school, thinking about everything I had learned that day. Suddenly, I saw a beautiful sunset. Without thinking, I whispered to myself, "That's breathtaking." I stopped walking. Did I just say that naturally? It was the first time I had used a new word in the right situation without forcing myself to remember it. I had learned breathtaking from a YouTube video a few weeks before, and now it just came out naturally. That's when I knew this method was working. Watching and copying native speakers wasn't just helping me sound more natural, it was helping me think in English. Now that I was comfortable copying native speakers from videos, I knew it was time to take a bigger step. Watching and repeating lines from movies was great, but I was still practicing alone. If I really wanted to speak English naturally, I needed to do something even scarier. I needed to talk to real people. Watching and copying native speakers had helped me in so many ways. My pronunciation was improving, and my sentences no longer sounded stiff. I was starting to feel more confident when speaking English alone. But, deep down, I knew something was still missing. I was still practicing by myself. I had never spoken to a real person in English. Not once. I told myself that as long as I kept practicing on my own, I would eventually feel ready to talk to others. But was that true? Or was I just making excuses because I was afraid? The truth was, the thought of speaking to someone in English made me nervous. What if I forgot my words? What if I made mistakes? What if they didn't understand me? These fears held me back for a long time. But one day, something happened that changed everything. One afternoon, I was sitting in a coffee shop, watching an English video on my phone. I had my notebook open, writing down new words as usual. At the table next to me, two people were speaking in English. I couldn't help but listen. They were talking about their weekend plans, laughing and chatting so easily. Their conversation wasn't complicated, but it sounded so natural. I understood almost everything they were saying, and I thought to myself, I know these words. I can do this. But then, the doubt crept in. Understanding English was one thing, but speaking it was another. I wanted to join their conversation, even if it was just a small comment like, "That sounds fun." But I stayed silent. I kept telling myself, what if I say it wrong? What if they look at me strangely? And so, I sat there, listening to them, letting the moment pass. When they got up and left, I felt frustrated with myself. Why didn't I say anything? I had spent months practicing English, yet I was still too scared to speak. That day, I almost gave up. But later that night, I thought about how far I had come. I reminded myself of the first time I spoke English alone in my room. How awkward it felt at first, but how much better I had gotten. Maybe speaking to others would feel scary at first too. But what if I just tried? The next day, I made a promise to myself. I was going to speak English with someone, no matter how nervous I felt. But who would I talk to? I thought about my classmates, but most of them didn't speak English either. Then I remembered something. There was an international student at my school named Sarah. She was from the US, and I had always wanted to talk to her. The problem was, I had never spoken to her before. I didn't know what to say or how to start a conversation. But I had to try. So during lunch, I took a deep breath and walked over to where she was sitting. My heart was racing. "Hi," I said. "Can I sit here?" Sarah smiled. "Of course." I sat down, feeling both excited and terrified. I had done it. I had spoken English to a real person. But now came the hard part. Actually having a conversation. I tried to remember the things I had heard in the videos I watched. Simple questions, small talk. So, "How do you like it here?" I asked. She smiled. "Oh, I like it a lot, but I miss home sometimes." I nodded. "Where in the US are you from?" "California." For a moment, I didn't know what to say next. But then I remembered something. A YouTuber I watched always said, "If you don't know what to say, ask a follow-up question." So I asked, "Is it really always sunny there?" Sarah laughed. "Not always, but yeah, most of the time." And just like that, we were talking. That conversation with Sarah was short, but it gave me so much confidence. I realized something important. Native speakers don't expect you to be perfect. They don't judge you for small mistakes. They just want to talk. So I kept going. I started looking for more opportunities to speak English. If I went to a cafe and saw an English-speaking tourist, I challenged myself to say something simple, like, "Nice weather today, right?" If I went to a bookstore and saw an English book I liked, I asked the cashier, "Have you read this one?" Each time, I felt nervous, but each time it got a little easier. One day, I made a big decision. I joined an online language exchange group where people practiced English together. The first time I joined a video call, my hands were shaking. There were people from all over the world, and everyone was talking so easily. I wanted to leave. But then the host of the call said, "Adland, why don't you introduce yourself?" I had no choice. So I took a deep breath and said, "Hi, my name is Adland. I'm learning English, and I want to practice speaking more." And guess what? No one laughed. No one pointed out my mistakes. Instead, they smiled and said, "That's great. Welcome." From that moment on, I started speaking more. I joined calls every week, and little by little, I stopped feeling so nervous. I made friends from different countries, and we practiced English together. A few months later, something happened that made me realize how far I had come. I was walking through the park when I saw a tourist looking at a map, looking confused. Without thinking, I walked up to her and said, "Do you need help finding something?" She looked relieved. "Yes, I'm trying to find the museum." I pointed in the right direction. "It's just a few blocks that way." "Thank you so much," she said. I smiled. "No problem. Have a great day." As I walked away, it hit me. I had spoken in English to a stranger without fear. Months ago, I would have been too scared to do that. I would have walked past her, afraid of making a mistake. But now, speaking English felt natural. I had done it. I had overcome my fear. Now that I wasn't afraid to speak, I wanted to take it even further. I wanted to sound more natural, more fluent. And I knew exactly what I needed to do next. I had to start thinking in English. Overcoming my fear of speaking English was a huge step. I no longer felt frozen when I had to talk to someone. I had spoken with classmates, strangers, and even joined online conversations with people from different countries. But even though I had gained confidence, I knew my journey wasn't over. Still had moments where I struggled to find the right words. Sometimes I had to stop and think before I spoke, translating from my native language in my head. Other times I understood what someone was saying, but I didn't know how to respond naturally. That's when I realized something important. If I wanted to be truly fluent, English couldn't just be something I practiced. It had to become a part of my daily life. One day, after an online English practice session, I asked myself, why do I still take so long to form sentences? Why can't I reply quickly like native speakers? Then I noticed something. Even though I was practicing English, every day I was still thinking in my native language first. I would form a sentence in my head in my language, translate it into English, and then say it out loud. That's why I was slow. That's why I sometimes sounded unnatural. I had to change the way I thought. I had to start thinking in English. At first, it felt strange, but I decided to make a simple rule. Whenever I was alone, I would talk to myself in English in my head. If I was cooking, I would think, I need to chop the onions first. If I was walking to class, I would say to myself, it's such a sunny day today. If I was looking at my to-do list, I would think, okay, first I'll finish my homework, then I'll go for a walk. I was training my brain to use English automatically. The more I did it, the faster my thoughts became. I stopped translating. I started forming sentences naturally. And one day, something amazing happened. I was in a store looking for a notebook when an English-speaking customer asked me, "Do you know where the pens are?" Without thinking, I said, "Yes, they're over." "There, next to the notebooks," I answered instantly. No hesitation, no translation. That's when I knew. English was becoming a part of my thinking. Thinking in English helped me improve, but I wanted more. I wanted English to be everywhere in my life. So I started making small changes. I changed the language on my phone to English. At first, it was confusing. But soon, words like settings, notifications, and reminders started feeling natural. To me, I started writing my daily to-do lists in English. I put sticky notes on objects in my room with their English names. I even set my alarm to wake me up with an English motivational quote every morning. The more English surrounded me, the more natural it became. It was no longer just something I studied. It was becoming my everyday language. One of the biggest challenges I faced was finding people to practice English with regularly. I had spoken to strangers before, but I needed more consistent conversations. Then, I had an idea. There was a girl in my class, Emily, who was fluent in English. She wasn't a native speaker, but she had been learning since she was young. I had always wanted to ask her to practice with me, but I was afraid she would think my English wasn't good enough. But after everything I had learned, I told myself, what's the worst that can happen? So one day after class, I said, Emily, I really want to improve my English. Would you like to practice with me sometimes? She smiled and said, of course, I'd love to. From that day on, we started having short English conversations At first, it was just small talk. How was your day? What did you do this weekend? But as we got more comfortable, our conversations became deeper. We talked about our dreams, our fears, our favorite memories, and I realized something important. English isn't just about speaking correctly. It's about connecting with people. One day, I was scrolling through my phone when I saw an announcement for a local event, a storytelling competition in English. A few months ago, I wouldn't have even thought about joining. But now, something inside me said, why not? So I signed up. The night before the competition, I was nervous. I practiced my story over and over again. When I finally stood on stage, my heart was pounding. But then, I looked at the audience, took a deep breath, and began speaking. The words flowed naturally. I wasn't just saying sentences. I was telling a story, expressing my thoughts, sharing my emotions. And when I finished, the audience clapped. I had done it. That day I realized that English was no longer just something I was learning. It was something I was living. It had become a part of me. When I think about my journey, I see how far I've come. I started by talking to myself in my room, feeling shy and unsure. Then I copied native speakers, practicing their pronunciation and expressions. Next, I faced my biggest fear, speaking with others. And now, English was a part of my daily life. I no longer felt afraid of making mistakes. I no longer hesitated before speaking. I could think, speak, and express myself freely in English. And that was the biggest achievement of all. My journey wasn't easy, but it was worth it. And if I could do it, so can you.